She underestimated you, thought you weren't enough, chose freedom believing she was in control of the situation. What she didn't know is that this freedom would come accompanied by empty nights, silent comparisons, and a pain difficult to explain. The pain of regret that arrives when ego no longer sustains the choice, when time shows that men like you are rare, and that losing a man of value doesn't hurt at the moment, it hurts later, when she realizes that you don't come back, don't beg, and don't get replaced. And beyond all these feelings, there are the ones that hurt the most, the ones that shake her the most. And these are exactly the ones I'm going to reveal to you in this video. So stay with me until the end, because understanding them will show you why your absence is worth more than any attempt to prove your value. From this moment on, you're going to hear what nobody has the courage to say, the truths that remain hidden behind ready-made speeches and that most prefer to pretend they don't see. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, leave a like and comment from which city you're watching from, because I want to know where you're following us from. Many women fear that a channel like ours reaches 100,000 subscribers because they know that the more men wake up, the less manipulation works. It's pointless to wake up if everyone around you continues to sleep. So subscribe to the channel now to grow our community of lucid and prepared men. It's completely free. Now, without beating around the bush, let's get to what really matters. First feeling, a strange emptiness they can't explain. There's something profoundly disturbing about feeling an emptiness without being able to name it, without being able to put into words what's really happening inside you. It's as if something essential had been ripped from inside your chest. But when you try to describe what it is, the words simply don't come. It's not pure sadness, it's not just longing. It's an absence that takes up space, that weighs, that bothers you in the most unexpected moments of the day. You could be in the middle of a conversation, laughing with friends, or completely occupied with work, and suddenly that feeling surges like a cold wave that paralyzes you for a few seconds. Something is missing. And the worst part is that you know exactly what it is, but you refuse to admit it out loud because admitting would be recognizing the size of the mistake you made. This emptiness doesn't shout, doesn't draw attention in a scandalous way. It whispers softly, persistently, incessantly, reminding you that there was someone there who filled spaces you didn't even know existed, who occupied places in your life that are now completely empty and exposed. It's like waking up in a familiar room and feeling that the furniture has been rearranged during the night, but nothing has physically changed. The difference is in you, in how you perceive the environment, in the feeling that something fundamental has been displaced, and now everything seems slightly wrong, uncomfortable, strange. This feeling is even more cruel because it doesn't come accompanied by clarity or rational understanding of what's happening. You can't point to a specific moment and say with certainty, this is where everything changed, or this is the day I realized what I had lost. Instead, it's a diffuse sensation, like thick fog that prevents you from seeing the way back, that leaves you disoriented in territory that should be familiar. You try to distract yourself, fill your days with endless commitments, new experiences, outings with friends, maybe even new people who appear in your life. But nothing seems to fit the same way it did before. It's as if there were a specific hole in the puzzle of your life, and every piece you try to put there simply doesn't fit, no matter how hard you force it, no matter how many times you try to make it work. The routine continues, the world spins, obligations are still being met, but inside you there's a restless quietness, a silent discomfort that doesn't leave you in peace even in moments that should be restful. And the question that always returns, inevitable and torturous, is, why does it hurt so much, something that you yourself chose to let go? Why does the freedom you sought so much now feel so heavy, so empty, so different from what you imagined it would be? The most frightening thing about this emptiness is that it doesn't ask permission to arrive, doesn't warn in advance, doesn't give you time to prepare emotionally. It simply appears in the most insignificant details of daily life, in the song that was playing in the car when you were together, in the scent of a perfume similar to his that someone wears on the street, in the specific type of joke that only he would make, and that made you laugh in a genuine way, in that particular way he had of looking at you when you told him something important. It's in these small triggers, in these involuntary memories that come out of nowhere, that you realize how much that presence was constant in your life, how much it was structural, fundamental. It wasn't just passing company or something superficial. It was emotional security. It was a mirror that reflected your qualities back to you. It was someone who truly saw you, who looked beyond the masks you wear for the world. And now that he's no longer there, you find yourself looking at your own reflection in the mirror and finding the person you see deeply strange, as if it were a stranger, because part of who you were, or who you were becoming beside him, left along with his departure. And the emptiness that remains isn't just his physical absence in your life. It's the absence of the improved version of yourself that existed when he was around, when you were seen, valued, truly loved. Second feeling, guilt for not having valued him while you had him. Guilt is one of the heaviest and most destructive feelings a person can carry in their chest, especially when you realize that you've lost something precious, rare and irreplaceable through pure negligence, through lack of attention, by taking for granted something that should never have been treated with indifference. It's looking back with the eyes of the present and seeing, with absolutely cruel and relentless clarity, all the times when he was there by your side, trying to build something real, investing time and emotional energy, being present in body and soul, and you simply didn't give him the value he deserved. Maybe you thought that was his obligation, that he should do those things because he was in a relationship and that's it, without considering that each gesture was a conscious choice he made every day. Maybe you thought there would always be time to value him more later, that he would always be there waiting patiently, that his love was unconditional and inexhaustible. And now, in the solitude you yourself created, each memory of those wasted moments returns like a stab to your conscience. The times he tried to have deep conversations and you were on your phone. The occasions when he planned something special and you treated it with disdain or indifference. The moments when he needed emotional support and you were too busy with your own things to really be present. Guilt doesn't let you forget or forgive yourself because you know there's no valid excuse. You had a treasure in your hands and you treated it as if it was something common, disposable, easy to find again. This guilt manifests itself in particularly painful ways in everyday life, transforming memories that should be good into self-inflicted psychological torture. You remember that time when he woke up early to make your favorite breakfast, and you complained about some insignificant nonsense instead of thanking him for the gesture and the intention behind it. You remember when he cancelled important commitments to be by your side in a difficult moment, and you didn't even recognize the sacrifice that represented for him, acting as if it were the minimum expected instead of realizing it was genuine love in action. You remember the times when he shared his fears, his insecurities, his most vulnerable dreams, and you responded with judgment, with subtle criticism, or worse, with indifferent silence that clearly communicated you weren't really listening or caring. And the most devastating part is realizing that he kept trying even in the face of your lack of reciprocity, kept investing even when you had already given up emotionally without having the courage to admit it. Guilt eats you up inside because you recognize now, too late, that that dedication wasn't weakness on his part. It was strength, it was emotional maturity, it was the kind of rare love that most people spend their entire lives looking for without ever finding. And you had that, were living that every day, but you were too blind, too proud, or simply too negligent to see the extraordinary value of what you possessed. The most torturous aspect of this guilt is that it offers no possibility of easy redemption or quick repair. You can't go back in time and do things differently. You can't take all those lost opportunities and relive them with the awareness you have now. Each "I should have" and each "why didn't I" accumulate in your mind like heavy stones that you carry wherever you go. You should have told him more often how important he was, should have demonstrated gratitude for the small daily gestures that made all the difference, should have defended him when others questioned the relationship instead of staying silent or worse, agreeing with the criticism. You should have chosen to stay home that night when he needed company instead of prioritizing meaningless social commitments. You should have realized that when someone truly loves you, accepts you completely, supports you unconditionally, and still challenges you to be better, that's not something to take for granted. It's something to protect, nurture, and value as the most precious asset of your life. But you didn't do any of that, and now you live with the crushing weight of knowing that you had in your hands exactly what you desperately seek today in the wrong places, with the wrong people, without ever being able to find again, because men of that caliber, that quality, that emotional depth, simply don't appear twice in the life of the same person who didn't know how to value them the first time around. Third feeling, belated regret. Belated regret is probably one of the most bitter and devastating feelings that exists because it always arrives, accompanied by the painful awareness that now it's too late, that the window of opportunity has closed definitively and there's no way to force it open again. It's different from guilt, which focuses on what you did wrong. Regret is about what you failed to do, about all the opportunities you had to change the course of history and simply didn't take advantage of, not from lack of opportunity, but through conscious choice or voluntary negligence. You regret not giving that longer hug when he clearly needed affection, not saying "I love you" more times when he was there by your side waiting to hear those words, not making sure to be present in those moments that seemed trivial, but that meant something profound to him. You regret having prioritized silly arguments about who was right, instead of prioritizing the harmony and peace of the relationship, having chosen pride instead of vulnerability, having opted to maintain emotional distance when he was there, with open arms offering genuine intimacy. And what hurts the most is knowing that you had full capacity to do differently, had all the time and all the necessary conditions, but simply didn't want to, didn't value it, didn't perceive the urgency until it was too late. Belated regret shows you with brutal clarity that you weren't a victim of circumstances. You were an active architect of your own loss, building brick by brick the wall that eventually separated you forever. This regret intensifies when you finally understand, after he's already gone, who he really was and what he represented in your life. It's as if a thick fog has dissipated, and suddenly you can see with absolute clarity all his qualities that you ignored, underestimated, or simply didn't recognize while you were immersed in the routine of the relationship. You bitterly regret having complained about the same characteristics that you now realize are exactly what you miss. His emotional stability that you called boring or predictable. His maturity that you interpreted as lack of spontaneity. His infinite patience that you confused with weakness or lack of personality. You regret having compared him with impossible idealizations, with romanticized versions of relationships that you saw on social media or in movies, without realizing that real love, the kind that sustains, that builds, that endures, is exactly the kind he offered. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't cinematographic, but it was genuine, solid, reliable. Now that he's no longer available, now that he's moved on and probably found someone who knows how to value everything that you wasted, regret consumes you with torturous questions. Why couldn't you see it before? Why did you have to lose him to finally understand what you had? Why did awareness arrive exactly when there's nothing more you can do, when all bridges have been burned and there's no way back? The cruelest dimension of belated regret is that it forces you to live eternally with alternate versions of your own story, with the what-ifs that will never have answers. What if you had chosen that weekend to take the trip he so wanted instead of making up excuses? What if you had supported his dream instead of discouraging it with skepticism disguised as realism? What if you had realized before that the problem wasn't him, but your own unrealistic expectations, your impossible standards, your inability to recognize true love when it was right in front of you? These questions have no answers, but they echo incessantly in your mind, especially on lonely nights. In moments when you're vulnerable, on days when life reminds you that people like him aren't easy to find, you deeply regret having believed the comfortable lie that there would always be someone better, that you deserved more, that you could do better, when the painful truth is that you had the best, had someone genuinely special, and through pure stupidity, immaturity, or lack of vision, you let him slip away. And now you live with permanent regret, knowing that you had your big chance and wasted it, that life offered you a rare gift and you discarded it as if it was something common, ordinary, easily replaceable. Belated regret is having to wake up every day knowing that you yourself created the emptiness that now haunts you, that you yourself closed the door on the only thing that really mattered, and that no matter how many other doors you try to open from here on out, none will lead to the same place, because that specific place, that specific person, that specific love, all of that was left behind, irreversibly lost in the past that you yourself destroyed. Fourth feeling, frustration at not finding someone of equal worth. The frustration of not finding someone of equal worth to what you lost is a particularly corrosive type of suffering, because every new attempt, every new meeting, every new person who enters your life serves only as a painful reminder of the elevated standard that you used to have and now can't reach anymore. You go out with other people, try to open yourself to new possibilities, force yourself to give chances to those who show interest. But invariably, at some point during the meeting, the conversation, or the beginning of something that could develop, you find yourself making inevitable comparisons and realizing that nothing comes close to what you had before. This new guy is superficial where he was deep, is immature where he was balanced, is inconsistent where he was solid as a rock. That other one demonstrates interest only physical, when he was genuinely interested in who you were as a person, in your thoughts, in your dreams, in your complexities. And there's that one who even seems promising at first, but soon reveals deep insecurities, emotional games, lack of direction in life, or simply doesn't have the ability to see you, to understand you, to value you the way he did naturally, without effort, because it was part of who he was. Frustration sets in as a constant presence because you begin to realize that you're not being too demanding or impossible to satisfy. You simply had the misfortune of experiencing a level of quality that is now your minimum standard, and the world out there simply doesn't offer that in abundance. Men of that caliber are rare, they're statistical exceptions, and you had one in your hands and you let him go. This frustration becomes even more intense when you realize that it's not just a matter of finding someone with similar characteristics superficially, but of finding that specific and rare combination of qualities that made him who he was. You do find men who are professionally successful, but who completely lack emotional intelligence and sensitivity. You meet guys who are emotionally available, but who have no ambition or direction in life. You come across people who demonstrate intense interest at first, but who disappear at the first difficulty or at the first sign that you're not perfect. And then you remember how he balanced all of this with impressive naturalness, had clear goals and worked to achieve them, but never let that overshadow the importance of the relationship, was emotionally mature and could have difficult conversations without turning them into war, but also had a strong personality and wasn't anyone's doormat, demonstrated love consistently through concrete actions, but also knew how to use words when necessary. The frustration of realizing that you're looking for something that seems not to exist anymore in your field of possibilities is overwhelming, because each frustrated attempt confirms what you most fear admitting. You lost something unique, irreplaceable, and the chances of finding it again are minimal or non-existent. And the dating market that you so romanticized, thinking it was full of better options, reveals itself to be a desert where you wander without finding water, where each mirage of something promising dissolves as soon as you get close. The most desolate aspect of this frustration is when it matures into resignation, when you finally accept that perhaps you'll never find someone of that level again, and that you'll have to choose between staying alone or settling for significantly less than you've already had, and both options seem terrible in their own way. You feel deeply frustrated with yourself for having created this impossible situation, for having involuntarily raised your standards by experiencing something exceptional and then destroying precisely the source of what you now consider essential. It's like someone who has always eaten mediocre food, one day experiences dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, develops a refined palate, and then discovers they can never afford that level of experience again. Except that in this case, you didn't just have access, you had unlimited access, and you yourself chose to walk out of the restaurant complaining that the food wasn't good enough. The frustration reaches its peak when you realize that he probably has already found someone new, someone who knows how to value exactly what you wasted, someone who is living the life that should be yours, enjoying qualities of his that you only managed to recognize after it was too late. And you're stuck in this vicious cycle, too frustrated with the available options to settle for less, but too aware of your own guilt to feel like you deserve to have again what you lost. It's living in an emotional purgatory where you can't really move forward because nothing compares to the past, but you also can't go back because that door closed permanently, locked from the other side by someone who finally got tired of waiting for you to see the obvious. Fifth feeling, wounded pride. Wounded pride is perhaps the most difficult feeling to admit publicly, because acknowledging it means accepting that a significant part of your pain doesn't come from true love or genuine connection, but from the narcissistic wound of having been the one left behind, the one who is no longer chosen, the one who lost something valuable while others watch. There's a silent but profound humiliation in realizing that you underestimated someone who was within your reach, treated with disdain, someone who deserved reverence. And now that someone has moved on and is perfectly fine, or worse, is better, without you. That man you treated as an option, whom you kept at emotional distance, whom you made feel he was in eternal audition for the boyfriend role without ever really winning it, simply stopped trying to win your approval and found another person who values him without games, without tests, without having him constantly prove his worth. And that hurts your ego in a way you didn't expect, because deep down, in some hidden corner of your psyche, you thought he would always be available, always there waiting on the bench in case you decided that after all, he was good enough. You counted on his devotion as if it were an acquired right, as if his patience and love were infinite resources that you would always have access to. And discovering that he had a limit, that he got tired and effectively replaced you with someone he considers better, that's not just loss, it's humiliation. It's having to swallow the bitter pill that you weren't as essential as you thought, weren't as special as your ego made you believe, and definitely weren't irreplaceable as you secretly assumed you were. This wounded pride manifests itself in particularly ugly and destructive ways, infecting your thoughts with poison that you know is irrational but can't avoid. You find yourself obsessed with knowing details about his life now. Who is the new person? What is she like? What does she have that you didn't have? Why does he seem so happy with her, when with you he seemed to always be struggling, always trying, always insufficient in your critical eyes? You scour social media looking for evidence that he's not really doing well, that he's just pretending happiness, that soon he'll realize he made a mistake and will want to come back with apologies and regret. But the truth you find is even more painful for your pride. He's genuinely doing well, visibly lighter, clearly happier than he was in the final times beside you when everything was already falling apart. And that's a stab to your ego because it means the problem was you, that the toxic dynamic you created was what weighed him down, that he was being suffocated not by lack of his own capacity, but by your inability to recognize what you had. Your pride is especially hurt when you see that the person he chose after you is someone who you, in your arrogance, would consider inferior, perhaps less attractive by superficial standards, perhaps less professionally successful, perhaps less interesting by the empty metrics you use to measure human value. And realizing that he prefers to be with someone like that, someone you judge as less, is a profound humiliation because it forces you to confront the possibility that the qualities that really matter in a relationship, kindness, gratitude, capacity to love genuinely, humility to recognize when something is good, are exactly the ones you don't have, and that he found in abundance in another person. The most destructive part of this wounded pride is when it prevents you from processing the other feelings in a healthy way and transforms you into someone you're not proud of being. Instead of using this experience to grow, to genuinely reflect on your mistakes and become a better person, you get stuck in a cycle of anger, resentment, and desire for emotional revenge that leads to nothing but more bitterness. You fantasize about him coming back regretful, begging for one more chance, while you coldly reject him and he finally feels on his own skin the pain you're feeling now. But these fantasies are empty, childish, and deep down, you know that. You find yourself speaking badly of him to mutual friends, trying to rewrite the history of the relationship to seem like you're the victim and he's the villain, when you know intimately that the truth is far more complex and much less favorable to you. You oscillate between wanting him to see you well and happy to prove you don't need him, and wanting him to know how much you're suffering so he feels guilt and remorse. This wounded pride keeps you emotionally attached to him in a way just as strong as true love would, but in a much more toxic and self-destructive way. And the cruel irony is that while you're consumed by this wounded pride, obsessed with proving your worth to someone who has already moved on, you're just confirming to yourself and to anyone observing carefully that you still haven't learned the main lesson. True worth doesn't need to be constantly proven, recognized, or validated externally. It simply is, and mature people recognize it when they see it. He saw that in you at the beginning, offered you love based on that, and you rejected it. Now he's seen that in another person and is living the healthy relationship that you could have had with him if you'd been able to put pride aside and simply accept being loved as you were. Sixth feeling, anger at yourself. Anger at yourself is probably the most violent and self-destructive feeling of all because the target of your fury is permanently present. You can't escape yourself, can't block, can't avoid, can't create distance. It's waking up every day and having to live with the person responsible for destroying what was most important, looking in the mirror and seeing not only who you are, but who you were when you made the choices that now haunt you. This anger isn't the momentary explosion that disappears after shouting or crying. It's constant fury, simmering just below the surface, directed at your own stupidity, at your voluntary blindness, at your unbearable arrogance that convinced you that you could do better, that you deserved more, that you had infinite time to decide if he was good enough. You feel angry at the version of yourself who heard friends gossip about him and agreed with petty criticism instead of defending him. The version who rolled her eyes when he tried to plan something special because you considered it too much. The version who prioritized absolutely everything, work, school, social media, unimportant outings, above the relationship that should have been your priority. And the most devastating part is that this anger changes nothing, doesn't repair anything, doesn't bring him back. It just corrodes you from the inside, like acid spilled on metal, slowly but inexorably destroying what remains of your inner peace and your ability to function normally in the world. This anger intensifies in a particularly cruel way, in moments when you catch yourself repeating the same destructive patterns, as if you hadn't learned absolutely anything from the most significant loss of your life. You meet someone new who demonstrates genuine interest, And instead of being grateful and receptive, you feel angry at yourself for immediately starting to look for faults, for comparing this person with him and finding them deficient in all aspects, for already sabotaging something before it even starts, because deep down you know that the new person isn't the one who isn't measuring up. It's you who can't open up, can't trust, can't allow yourself to be vulnerable again. You feel unbearable anger when you realize you're wasting precious time of your life dwelling on the past, stalking his social media, analyzing every photo looking for signs that he's not really doing well, creating imaginary scenarios in your head about how it would be if you could go back, when rationally you know that this is pathetic, that you should be moving forward, building something new, becoming someone better. Anger reaches unbearable peaks when you realize that you destroyed actively, consciously, systematically, something precious that you'll never have again, not because you were too young or too immature to know what you were doing. You were old enough, had enough awareness, simply chose poorly because you were convinced that your superficial fantasies about how a relationship should be were more important than the solid and genuine reality you had in your hands. And this awareness of total culpability, this impossibility of blaming circumstances or other people, this brutal clarity that you yourself architected your own misery, fuels a self-directed anger that finds no healthy escape valve. The most dangerous aspect of this self-directed anger is when it starts to overflow into other areas of your life, contaminating relationships with friends and family, sabotaging professional opportunities, destroying your self-image in ways that go far beyond the specific mistake you made in the relationship. You start to see yourself as fundamentally flawed, as someone incapable of recognizing what is good, as a person destined to always destroy what is precious. And this narrative becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you effectively start to act in accordance with this negative identity you've constructed for yourself. You punish yourself in subtle and not so subtle ways, isolating yourself socially because you don't deserve company, sabotaging yourself at work because you don't deserve success, treating yourself badly physically through negligence with food or sleep, because deep down you feel you deserve to suffer for the choices you made. Anger transforms into a distorted form of self-punitive justice, where you become simultaneously the criminal and the judge, condemning yourself to a perpetual sentence of remorse and emotional self-flagellation. You replay the same scenarios mentally 1,000 times, always arriving at the same devastating conclusion. You had all the right cards in your hand, the game was completely in your favor, and you managed the impressive feat of losing spectacularly, not by bad luck, not by external factors, but through pure emotional incompetence and strategic stupidity. And perhaps most tragically, all this anger, all this self-destructive fury, doesn't necessarily transform you into a better or wiser person. Often it just paralyzes you, keeps you trapped in a vicious cycle of self-deprecation that prevents you from using this painful experience as a real catalyst for change and growth. You're so busy hating yourself for the past that you can't build a different future, so consumed with anger at who you were that you can't become who you need to be, so trapped in self-flagellation that you lose the capacity for genuine self-forgiveness that would be the only real way out of this emotional hell that you yourself created, and in which you now live as a willing prisoner of your own relentless anger. Seventh feeling, a sense of abandonment, even though it was her choice. The sense of abandonment that you experience is particularly confusing and psychologically disturbing because rationally you know that you created this situation, that you were the one who pushed him away, that you were the one who made the relationship unsustainable with your attitudes, your neglect, your failure to value, and yet, emotionally, you feel abandoned, rejected, left behind as if you were an innocent victim of cruel circumstances. There's a profoundly uncomfortable cognitive dissonance in knowing intellectually that you were the architect of your own loneliness, but feeling viscerally as if someone had ripped something essential from you against your will. It's as if a primitive part of your brain couldn't process the complexity of the situation and reduced everything to a simple narrative. Important person left your life. You were abandoned. And the fact that you yourself pushed that person away doesn't magically eliminate the feelings of rejection, of no longer being wanted, of having been considered not valuable enough for him to keep fighting indefinitely for you. Because deep down, in a selfish and immature part that you don't even like recognizing exists, you expected his love to be unconditional and eternal, that he would wait patiently while you resolved your issues, explored your options, decided whether he was really what you wanted, and discovering that no, that he had a limit, that eventually he got tired and effectively abandoned you, even if justifiably. This touches deep wounds of rejection that maybe come from long before this specific relationship. This sense of abandonment manifests itself in contradictory and irrational ways that you yourself recognize as absurd but can't control emotionally. You look at your phone, hoping for a message from him, compulsively checking if he viewed your stories on social media, feeling a sting of pain every time you realize he's no longer paying attention to you, no longer trying to start a conversation, shows no more interest in knowing how you're doing. And you know you have no right to feel this way, that you actively discouraged this type of attention when you had it, that you treated him with coldness when he demonstrated care, but still you feel abandoned, now that he finally respected your signals and pulled away completely. There are moments when you fantasize that he'll break the silence, that he'll send a message asking how you are, that he'll demonstrate that he still thinks about you even after everything. And when that doesn't happen, when days turn into weeks and weeks into months of absolute silence, the sense of abandonment deepens, as if it were being rejected repeatedly every day that passes without contact. The cruel paradox is that if he did contact you, you'd probably respond with indifference or even hostility, protecting your wounded pride. But his complete lack of attempts communicates a devastating message that you don't want to hear. You no longer make a difference in his life. He's genuinely moved on. You were effectively replaced and forgotten. And even knowing that you have no moral right to complain, that this was exactly what you asked for through your actions throughout the relationship, the emotional feeling of having been abandoned, discarded, considered no longer worthy of effort, corrodes your self-esteem in ways you didn't anticipate. The most psychologically disturbing aspect of this sense of abandonment is when it forces you to confront deeper questions about your self-worth and your relationship patterns that probably predate this specific man. Maybe you realize that there's a pattern in your life where you repeatedly test people, push them away to see if they come back, create distance to check if their love is strong enough to overcome obstacles you yourself put in the way. And when someone eventually doesn't pass the impossible test, when someone finally gives up jumping through your endless hoops, you feel abandoned and use it as proof that you were never truly loved, that people always leave you, that you're not worthy of lasting love. It's a self-destructive cycle where you create the exact conditions for the abandonment you most fear, and then use the resulting abandonment as justification for continuing to create the same conditions in future relationships. With him, maybe you were unconsciously testing whether his love was real, whether he would keep trying no matter how difficult you made things, whether he would prove to be different from other people who left you in the past, and when he eventually set healthy boundaries and withdrew from a toxic dynamic, instead of recognizing this as a sign of maturity and self-care on his part, you processed it as more evidence that you always end up being abandoned. The sense of abandonment you carry now is particularly painful, because at some deep level you know you're not an innocent victim of external patterns beyond your control. You're an active participant in creating your own abandonment nightmares, pushing away exactly what you most need, sabotaging genuine connections before they can deepen enough to really hurt you, and then feeling justified in your belief that true love doesn't exist and that everyone eventually abandons you without ever critically examining the role you yourself play in this repetitive and destructive pattern. If this video made sense to you, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write gratitude in the comments. This small action helps the algorithm take this message to more men who need to wake up and reclaim their inner strength. Every interaction of yours propels this movement. Thank you for following along. Stay with us, because every day we share ideas and guidance to help you strengthen your mind, rebuild your self-esteem, and take control of your own story. A hug, and see you in the next video.